Hey, hey, it's Virginia. I am re-releasing this episode, which originally aired on April 24th, 2005, shortly after the actual filming of season 19, episode 15, which will air tonight, October 9th, 2025. I thought it would be really fun to hear about my adventures that night. It's also interesting now that the season has aired to understand some of my comments from my observations that night and my interactions with some of the cast members. It was a really fun night. I had a great time. I love the Innocence Center. I adore Jasmine, and I can't wait to do a fundraiser with her. That night was a lot of money was raised, a lot of goodwill, and a very interesting episode, which we're going to watch tonight. So I hope you enjoy this re-release of the Boot Scootin' episode from April 2025. Here goes. Freedom, food, and a little boot scootin'. That's what I've been up to. It's Virginia. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Living on the Verge podcast. Before I tell you all about the boot scootin', let me welcome new listeners from Brazil, France, Nigeria, the UK, and United Arab Emirates. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. Last week was a busy one, guys. If you listened to the last episode, the supersized episode, then you know that I was at the season 2 premiere of The Valley at Jax's Studio City. So if you haven't, go back and listen to it. It's a really good episode. But that was on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I went to an event called Freedom, Food, and a Little Boot Scootin'. It was to benefit the Innocence Center, and in particular, Anthony Chidas. I'll tell you a little bit about him in a little while, but first, let me tell you about the event and why we were there. So the Innocence Center in San Diego is an organization that focuses on getting wrongly convicted individuals out of prison. I started following the organization a few years back, mainly because I have a soft spot in my heart for their mission. I can't imagine what it would be like to be wrongly convicted of a crime you didn't commit and then to have to serve that sentence. It happens a lot more than you think, and thank God for organizations such as the Innocence Center. You may have heard of the Innocence Center if you watch The Real Housewives of Orange County. Emily Simpson is an attorney, and she is an ambassador for the Innocence Center in San Diego. So she has featured the organization on the episodes, on the show before. The exciting part is they were doing it again. So I got to go to a filming of The Real Housewives of Orange County. Now, I'm sure if you're really into the Housewives world, then you know that they're currently filming the next season of Orange County. And this episode is supposed to be featured with Anthony Chidas again. He was featured last year on an episode. You may remember Emily took him and they bought him a suit. And so that's who this event was for. And I'll tell you a little bit about Anthony. Anthony Chidas was sentenced to life in prison for murder in 2002. He was 16 years old. He served 20 years for a crime he did not commit. He was released in 2022, but evidence of his innocence was found, I believe, as far back as 2020. But due to COVID, it took an extra 2 years to get him out of prison. You can read the full story on the Innocence Center's website. However, I have good news, you guys. I met Anthony and he's agreed to come on the podcast. So I am very honored to let him come on and tell you his story firsthand. That'll be coming up soon, and I'm very excited to share that with you. So back to this event. We were there to raise money because Anthony would like to become an auto technician and a diesel mechanic. And apparently it costs about $38,000 to go to school. He already had the school picked out. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He just needed the funds. So the Innocence Center has an education fund that is specifically for this purpose, which is to help re-educate and bring people back into society after they've been wrongly convicted. I arrive at the cute little place in Costa Mesa and park in an underground parking, very safe, cool location. And I get out of the car, and first thing I see is Miss Emily Simpson. She is standing outside of a expedition, and Shane is sitting in the back seat with the windows down, and she's talking to who I'm guessing is one of her producers. Why is Emily Simpson there? Well, I told you she's an ambassador, but also because whether you know it or not, The Real Housewives of Orange County is filming currently, and this event was going to be filmed for the upcoming season of The Real Housewives of Orange County. So that's why Emily was there. And guess what, guys? Everybody else was there too. I'm going to get into it and I'll tell you all about it because it was really, truly a memorable and lovely evening. It was fun, it was emotional and touching, but overall, it was for a really good cause. And I got to see an episode of The Housewives filmed. I mean, it's win, 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 win. I couldn't be more happy. So I walk up to the front door of the restaurant and seated outside with a table and chairs are probably maybe 3, 4, 5 people. Oh, I forgot to mention, as I'm walking from the parking lot to the restaurant, there's a camera crew stationed at the corner, kind of filming people walking up to the event. And I get to the front and there is, like I said, a table and chairs that's set up there. And there's a few people that are kind of milling around. You can tell they were like production assistants. And I was asked to sign a waiver and I was to hold the waiver under my chin while they took my picture. So basically I was releasing my rights to be on film for this particular occasion. Once I did that, I walked in and the venue was really cute. It was not big at all. The first thing you notice as you walk in is a dance floor, and then there's kind of a ramp up to the left and a ramp up to the right. You pass by a room that, for some unknown reason, had the windows covered with paper. We find out the reason later. So there are 4 booths that are not reserved and 2 that are reserved right toward the front of the stage. And then off to the left is some high top tables kind of overlooking the dance floor. And then off to the right is the bar with some more tables and chairs. And then tucked away in the corner is a mechanical bull. So it's a really cool place. I think it would be a fun place to go to on any other night. But in this particular case, it was going to be a very quaint crowd. I met up with Jasmine. I had spoken to her before, but it was the first time I got to meet her in person. And after we, gave each other a big hug, I asked her how things were going and how many people we expected. And she said she thought it was going to be around 80 people. And maybe even less. So it was going to be a very intimate event. And I was really excited to hear that. But I was just hoping that they would raise enough money for Anthony to, reach his goal and be able to go to school. So I sit down and as I walk in there, I've never been to a live filming of an episode of The Housewives. I think a long time ago, I went to a filming of a sitcom, and I've been to a couple of filmings of like game shows, but never something like this. And even people who have been to filmings told me how incredibly exorbitant and extravagant this crew was. There must have been 5 cameras with the boom mics and, the other mics. They were just milling around from the moment I got there. And from the moment I got there, you could tell that they were already filming. At one point, they were interviewing Emily. She walked in right after me. And then at another point, they were interviewing Jasmine. And Jasmine is with the Innocence Center. And she is the director of policy and development. And she's also a policy representative for California Innocence Coalition. A very powerful and important woman for the Innocence Center. And she's a lovely lady to boot. So very shortly after I got back with my drink, Anthony walked in with his date, who was his friend from work, Lindsay. Jasmine introduced us and we started chatting. Jasmine asked Anthony how he was feeling. and he said he was feeling very nervous, but he was excited. So I offered to go get him a drink, and I ran over to the bar and I got him a whiskey, and I came back and we sat down at the booth that I had set aside. So we're chatting, and then in come these two ladies that I kind of recognized but wasn't quite sure. Well, very soon thereafter, I placed one of them as Shireen, who is Shane's sister, and they came and sat with us. So they asked if the table was reserved, and I said no, that I only had two people sitting there at that point. Anthony and Lindsay were milling around. I believe at that point they were filming him with Emily and Jasmine. I don't know. We'll have to watch the episode. But I was talking with the ladies, and I offered for them to sit down. They explained to me that Shireen said my mom and dad are coming. So that's Shane's parents, Perry, and please forgive me, I don't remember his name, but they were coming and they were concerned that there wouldn't be any place for them to sit. So of course I said, of course they could sit here. We had just gotten done taking a couple of pictures, and in walks Elizabeth Vargas. I recognized her immediately, but you could kind of tell that nobody else did. First and foremost, she is beautiful in person. So the first thing I did was I, said, "Hi, Elizabeth." And, she immediately reached out and shook my hand. I told her my name was Virginia. She said, "Oh, are you with the Innocence Center?" And I said, "No, not at the moment, but I do plan on working with them in the near future." And I told her, "You're just so striking in person." And she just was like, "Really?" And she got all excited and she hugged me. And then she started talking to me about the fact that she was at the event that evening because Emily was her friend, but also because her boyfriend ran one of the largest diesel companies in the world. And she even Googled it and brought it up for me. But you know what? There was a lot going on, so I did not retain that. Sorry, Elizabeth. Anyhow, her friend walked up and we started talking a little bit. And then Elizabeth's boyfriend called, so she ran out and talked to him on the phone. So there you go. If anybody thought that Elizabeth Vargas was dating Jim Bellino, we now know that is not true. I know that firsthand. And we also know that she's involved and has a boyfriend. She is smitten. Her friend said that she is just over the moon with this guy. So hopefully things work out because she's a super lovely lady. I just really enjoyed talking to her. So within, minutes of one another, we get Jen and Ryan, Gretchen and Slade, and Shannon showed up with a friend that I did not recognize. And then things kind of started to, take shape. They served the food that was going to be served. It was kind of up in a buffet in the back. It was kind of a help yourself situation. And then Jasmine got up and spoke for the organization and kind of thanked everybody for being there, and then handed things over to Emily. Emily also thanked us for being there. And by this time, you're being filmed because there are cameras and crews and boom mics and lights everywhere. But I'm focused on what's going on the stage. So Emily introduces us to her attorney, who also happens to be the attorney for the Menendez brothers. Her name is Alex. So she says Alex needs to leave because tomorrow is the resentencing hearing for the Menendez brothers. So that's an interesting little aside that happened there. And, who knew that the Menendez brothers and Emily Simpson share an attorney? Well, now you know. So Emily says we're all there for a night of line dancing, drinking, more line dancing, and a lot more drinking. Everybody laughs. She announces Anthony. Anthony takes the mic and he tells his story very briefly, just kind of talks about how he's humbled and honored for what is happening. And everybody claps and the line dancing begins. Right around this time, I spot Eddie and Tamra, and they're talking to Terry Dubrow. So I know Heather's somewhere around there too. And then a little while later, I see Heather and Terry, and they're talking to Shannon at one point. So, and then Gina and Travis were there, but I didn't see them until way later because it turns out that they were up in the front, towards the front of the stage. And I didn't want to go up there because that's where all the cameras were. So I just kind of stayed toward the back of the dance floor. But I was so excited. Listen, to be able to knock off 2 bucket list items in one day is big. And for me, seeing a filming of a Housewives episode is a bucket list item. That it's my favorite franchise, the first franchise I ever watched, that I watched from the very, very beginning, and that it's with my favorite housewife, Emily Simpson, who is holding the event, unbelievably priceless. But on top of that, it is a bucket list item for me to learn line dancing. I've never learned how to line dance. I know how to do it now, guys. I learned it that night. So I got to cross 2 really big things off of my bucket list in one night, and I was really, really happy about that. I never thought I'd get that opportunity, and it was just super fun. A little bit worried about what I might look like dancing out there since it was my first time, but towards the end of the night, nobody really cared. We were all just having a very good time together. So after the first segment of line dancing, they kind of stopped the music and cleared the dance floor again. And before that, I noticed that a few of the group would, break off into clusters, and the cameras and the mics would run over to them and move into a corner and follow them. So obviously they were having the conversations that we get to see when we watch the show. So they're clearing the floor, and Emily gets up on stage and she announces that Gina and Travis graciously donated $5,000. Yay! And then Terry Dubrow takes the mic and says, I would like to match Gina's $5,000, which was very gracious. And then Elizabeth Vargas goes up on stage and says, I would like to match the $5,000 as well. So there you go, guys. In a matter of 15 seconds, they raised $15,000 more for Anthony's cause. That was really cool. I think I heard later in the evening, some podcast, I don't know which one, donated $10,000. So $25,000 was donated that I know of that night. And just so you know, as of the time of this recording, they had raised $41,495. So they surpassed Anthony's $38,000 goal. And, the rest will be for mechanics, tools, and shoes, and all the other things that he might need. At some point before Anthony got up on stage and before all the announcements started, Anthony and Lindsay were sitting at the table with me, and we were having a little snack. And he started to tell me his story and talk to me about a couple of things that, just brought us back. We kind of were both raised in the same neighborhood, years apart, of course, but we had a lot of commonalities. So it was very easy to get along with him. And I kind of sensed that I brought him a little bit of comfort in the situation that he was in. So about that time that Anthony, Lindsay, and I were sitting there, Perry and her husband walk in, and Shireen and I now know the girl to be Michelle stand up so that they could sit down. So they sat for a few minutes, but Shane came over and took them to a different location, which was probably better suited for where they wanted to be. And to be honest with you, Perry didn't sit still for more than 5 minutes. I have amazing pictures of her dancing. She is adorable. Her daughter says she's 82 years old. I'll post the picture just so you could see her outfit. You tell me if Perry's giving 82, you guys. So they started another lesson, and once the lesson was over, then they played the song and everybody danced and everybody clapped. And I'm quite certain that all of that was being filmed, at least to some extent, but I'm not sure how much they'll show, because as that is going on, I could see that Shannon was in one corner talking to Gina, and then Tamra was also talking to Shannon, I believe it was, but she wasn't going anywhere near Gretchen. Surprise. So anyway, for those of you who thought Tamra quit, I saw with my very own eyes, she's filming. And she and Gretchen are still at odds. From what I could see that night, as the night progresses, they break off into other groups. And it's right around this time that I noticed somebody going in and out of the room with the paper on the windows. It was a production room. When they opened the door, I could see no fewer than 15 monitors, and there was all kinds of equipment. There must have been 10, 15 people in there looking at footage, and I could not believe that they were actually producing right there on the spot. It's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a huge production. Ha ha ha. So I sat there a while lurking and seeing what I can see. And it was pretty fascinating. That was one of my favorite parts of the evening. And then I, went on and continued walking around. At one point, I encountered Heather Dubrow. We talked for a little bit about her podcast. I told her how much I liked it. And then she started talking about long-time marriages. And she asked me if I had heard the podcast about sleep divorce. And she said she just thought that that was crazy. And I told her that, I might beg to differ, that it might be better for some couples. I don't know. Whatever, we took a picture. She said she was thirsty and she grabbed Terry, said, "Nice to meet you," and ran off. I don't know if she was trying to get away from me. I did see her within 15 seconds or so in front of the cameras again. So thank God I avoided that. And then I ran into Gina. She took a picture with me. She was very sweet. And I thought, very personable and approachable. So at this point, it's getting later on in the evening and they're just having free dancing now. People are milling around. The cameras are still filming and you can see Emily going back and forth. And at one point she goes up to a group and you can see that she's really animated and frustrated. And I don't know what's going on because she's across the room, but clearly there's something going on. I can't wait to see this season. And then I'm sitting there talking with Michelle at our table, and Slade, Gretchen, and Tamara were in the middle of the dance floor. Nobody was really dancing. Eddie was off to the side a little bit, and Gretchen and Tamara were having a conversation. I, too, was deep in conversation with Michelle, so I didn't even really notice. And then at one point, Eddie kind of walks up to Tamara, and they start to walk out. So Michelle says to me, "Oh, it looks like they're getting ready to leave. I wanted to take a picture with them." And I said, "You know what? I haven't gotten a picture with them either. Let's go ask." So we both get up and we walk onto the dance floor to approach them as they're walking out the door. And we come to find out that they're in the middle of a scene. Tamara is storming out after just having had a fight with Gretchen. I was mortified. I turned to Michelle and I said, "Oh my God, they're filming. We just interrupted a scene." And I ran back to my table, highly embarrassed. So embarrassed that I wanted to take a walk outside just to regroup. So I tell Michelle, "Let's go outside for a minute." And as I'm walking outside, I open the door and I see a camera in my face, and Tamara and Eddie are standing outside being interviewed by the producers. I closed the door, ran back into the place, and the producer that was standing by the door said, "You could go ahead and leave." And I said, "I'm going to go sit down. I've made enough of a mess." So I don't know if any of this will show. I highly doubt it will. This is what editing is all for. But I will not forget the moment that I embarrassed myself. I have a picture that I'll post as a boomerang of Gretchen talking to Slade after the walkout, and she is activated. She's pissed off. And then Jen and Ryan come up and they're talking amongst the four of them. And I'm now staying away because I know that they're filming this. And, then things dissipated and everybody kind of went about their own way. It looked like the cameras moved on somewhere else. And at that point, Slade and Ryan were standing right by the door. I was getting ready to leave. I asked Slade and Ryan if they would take a picture. And so Slade grabbed my camera and took a couple of selfies of us. And I went and I said goodbye to Jasmine. I believe Anthony had left by then because I did not get a chance to say goodbye to him. And I left. It was a lovely event. They raised a lot of money. I got to see the magic of filming. I can't wait to watch this episode when the season comes out. I believe they normally air somewhere around October. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. I don't know if I could wait that long. So what is my takeaway? Okay, my takeaways are Emily will do just about anything for the Innocence Center, and that's pretty cool. Jasmine and her crew are doing some amazing work. Heather and Terry Dubrow Okay, first of all, I forgot to tell you guys about Terry's jacket. He was wearing one of those long um, Western style jackets. And at one point, he flashes and he had this fancy lining. And when I was talking to Heather, she told me that it was made by, I couldn't remember the name. I'm not going to stop the podcast to go look it up. So, the same guy who designs all his other stuff. And he designed this jacket for Terry. So that was kind of a cool tidbit that I got to see and hear. That was my takeaway with the DeBros. I've heard that she's very stuffy and very mean. I did not get that, but she is very intentional, if you will. Then Gina and Travis, they were super cute, very down to earth. I've already had another experience with Emily, so of course I love her. And then Tamara and Eddie, Tamara did not seem like she was in a good headspace, like at all. Her body language was giving, I really don't want to be here. And then given what happened, I have no idea. But that was my takeaway from that. So, all in all, it was a really great event. I had a wonderful time. I met good people. I saw that they raised a lot of money. I'm very excited about being more involved with this organization and bringing an event to you. I'll keep you guys posted on that. And of course, I'll let you know when my interview with Anthony will be as well, because I'd love for you to hear his story firsthand. So, thanks, guys, for joining me for another episode. I have a lot to cover, but I really want this to stand on its own. So I'm going to end here, and I'll come back and bring you guys up to speed on all the episodes and all the shows that we're behind on. And then we'll be back on track. And if this continues at this pace, we may have to move this podcast to twice a week. But for now, we're going to go ahead and keep it at once a week. Thanks again, guys. Have a good one.